So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Sheikh Abdullah Salim Cultural Center online platform. We are very glad to see you all tonight, familiar faces, our previous educator speaker, Mr. Lauren Bowers. Glad to see you here. And we are very happy to see you all tonight with us. We are enjoying the celebration of the International Education Day with all of you. I am Nada Al-Hussein. I am the Education and Public Engagement Manager at the Sheikh Abdullah Salam Center. I'll be your host for tonight. Our guest speaker is very special for tonight. She's the one and only Miss Laura Hawkins. And now stateside, after a 6-year stint in Kuwait, Laura has taught English literature for 11 years. She grew up in Kansas, earned a BA in English theater from Warren Wilson College, a master's degree in teaching from Brown University, and now she's in the latest stages of her PhD at Columbia's University's Teacher College. Innovation is at the heart of her classroom practice, which for Laura is a concept deeply rooted in applied learning, one in which students work with each other and the community to celebrate ideas through meaningful action. Laura is currently working at the Franklin School for Innovation, where she was the recipient of the Golden Apple Award recently. Congratulations. Her students say that she does not teach to get the work done. She teaches to make a difference. Back when Laura was at the American School in Kuwait, that's not a long time ago, last year, she initiated the Small Learning Community Program, which was centered on interdisciplinary project-based learning and student choice. The program was an experimental education program. Students were asked to synthesize curricular standards with their own interests, and the results were amazing. Life-sized cardboard canoes that explored the relationship between geometry and buoyancy, student-coded math video games, poems that were published by professional journals. Tonight, we will all engage in the SLC process. Tonight, Laura is here with us to tell us all about the program, the challenges, the rewards. She will also have us experience and engage in the SLC program. And she has some students with her. So Laura, the stage is all yours and for your students as well. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here and really happy to be with you all and see some familiar faces and have new people. I'm really excited about tonight because so many of the people who contributed to the small learning community are here. So it makes it feel extra special. I will give you a heads up that like all of my lessons, I've accidentally put way too much into what would be a reasonable amount of time. So if I start speeding through and going too quickly, please slow me down. I promise I won't be offended and will be very grateful. So the first thing, hopefully you have a phone or a tablet nearby, and I'd like to start by getting everyone to download Anchor. It's an app and it's purple. So if you could take out your phones and download that, we're going to be playing with it in a little bit.
Okay, while everyone is downloading the app, would you mind please typing in the chat where you are, what's your role? Are you a student, a teacher, a parent, an admin, or simply a youth, a researcher? Please go ahead and do that in the chat. Thank you.
Or a former SLC teacher in the case of certain folks. Oh, that's great. Oh, first grade, what a fun group. Little kids still love it. APS, awesome. Oh, GPS, very good. It's really cool to see a range of teachers from different schools here. All right, well, we'll get going here. Awesome. All right, so just like Nada said, this is about project-based learning and student choice and how we develop the small learning community. So tonight what we'll do is I'll describe the small learning community, we'll model a typical lesson together, and then we'll engage in that process. And then I'll spend a little time at the end reflecting. And our goal, instead of students will be able to, you will be able to hopefully facilitate a choice in standards-based interdisciplinary projects. So my goal is that you leave with one tool in your tool belt that maybe you can use and adapt in your classrooms or as you interact with kids. First thing I'd like to do though is I'd like to invite you to think of a story. This could be a story that you love or one that you remember, one about you or your family, and it can be a fact or fiction. And it doesn't have to be very long, but you are going to recap that story in a breakout room. So mine, for instance, would be, I really love the story of The Little Prince. It's about a boy who travels around the universe on a flock of seagulls, and my dad used to read it to me when I was a little girl, and that was a really like special time to me. So can you figure out what your story is while I get my breakout rooms going real quick? A bit of shuffling as I try and get folks. I want to make sure everyone has a youth researcher in their room. So what's going to happen is I'm going to drop you into breakout rooms, and what I'd like to have you do is share that story. So we're using this as kind of our introduction. So share your name, share the story that you thought of, which I promise is relevant to something we're about to do. And then third, if you would, ask questions to each other, just to kind of like keep that awkward digital silence that happens in breakout rooms at bay. Are there any questions before I send you off to breakout rooms? All right. It's those 3 pieces in the chat box, and you also have a youth researcher who should help. By the way, I should have asked but didn't. What do you love about Frankenstein?
It's a story about the human condition. It's how he's very misunderstood. Everyone thinks that Frankenstein or the Frankenstein's monster is a monster, but to me, I actually sympathize with the monster more. It feels like it's a story about being misunderstood and being bullied into being the person, being the monster that he was, because he had no other choice than act the way he acts. So I kind of like to relate it to, you know, especially the youth, misunderstood youth.
Yeah, I love that. And of all the stories, I think it speaks so much about like learning and environment and what that does to us. Like, it's a great story to latch onto. All right. So we'll be turning back to this group. So hopefully you got to meet each other, at least hear each other's names. I know that was quick, but again, always packing too much into the space available. So, were there any, I was really struck that Frankenstein came up in our group. Anyone else have a story that like kind of struck them or surprised them? Either, we also too had one, Tracy's been in Kuwait for 14 years, or 40 years? 40 years, yeah, which I thought was kind of neat. Anyone else want to share out? No pressure, we can keep moving. If you would though, hold on to the story that you told, because you're gonna record it in just a minute. Just that little tiny blip is kind of like a practice exercise. So I want to tell you real quick the story of the small learning community and the way it came to be, or why I sucked at teaching writing, because that's the true title of the small learning community. But before we get into that, there's this quote that a professor at Columbia told me. He says, if you're gonna be a monkey, you be a gorilla. But I found out it's actually not his quote, it's from a rapper named Redman. Either way though, it holds. And I decided I was going to be the gorilla of writing instruction. So I did 6+1 of writing. I did graphs, patterns, and formulas, traits, and Atwell's lessons that change writers, Lucy Calkins Writers Workshop, free writing, prompted writing, journal writing, jigsaw writing, guided writing, extensive outlining, editing circles, peer editing, and also to some nature-centered eco-critical writing. And ultimately what I taught was how to really hate writing, because kids felt it was boring, that it was pedantic, and revision felt like punishment. So this is where I had the 4 original youth researchers entered. So there's 4 students at ASK, and I asked them, hey, how do we make writing better? And those 4 gave rise to a whole collective of youth researchers, some of whom are here now. So if you see like Jude and Reem, like, actually, can you wave if you're a youth researcher? Mackenzie, yeah. So these kids are all at ASK, but they engage in really critical work looking at the small learning community and trying to figure out how to make school better. So that was our original question. How do we make writing class better? And we decided it should be culturally responsive. So the writing that we're doing in Kuwait should probably feel different from the writing we're doing in Kansas, right? Otherwise, we're just importing one model into the other. 2, there should be choice. Student, I don't know what Jude's going to grow up to be, but I bet Jude has a pretty good idea. So maybe Jude should have some say on the types of writing skills she gets to develop. And third, audience is key. If writing lives just between the student and me, that's wasted effort, right? She should be sending out, Serena Sala got a poem published, right? Because she sent it out to a journal. That's so deeply meaningful. Natanya was writing for a bunch of professional journals with work around what it means to be a Nigerian student. It was really inspiring. And so Mr. Murphy, who's here, was really helpful in creating this course, Reading and Writing for Publication. And the whole idea was that students would write for professional audiences of their choice with the objective of getting published. Grades were collaboratively decided, and the content was entirely established by students. So what happened is students would identify a culture or community that was important to them, and then they would try and write to them. So like Ray is a really avid reader of the New York Times. And maybe he says, I really love the op-eds and I want to enter more fully into the community of journalists. So he's going to enter into a contest perhaps and write op-ed pieces and try and get them published. And ultimately, here's what we found. Students, when they had all of this choice, they were still reading and writing, and for the most part, they were really enjoying what they were doing. But remember, if you're gonna be a monkey, you have to be a gorilla. So all of a sudden, when my admin came and said, hey, if you could do anything at school, what would you wanna be? And the thought was, well, if we can do this model with English, what happens if we try it with all core subjects? So with that, we had the small learning community. So what we did is we took the regular schedule, right, where students take English, math, science, and history. And we sort of isolated those and said, okay, well, what happens if we just give one content lesson a day? And then take those other two and really, really focus it on skills and medium instruction and getting kids to make interdisciplinary connections. Because we were thinking that if the writing we're doing in English supports the writing we're doing in biology and in history, well, then we maybe need less instructional time because the skills are speaking to each other. And so here was our process. We started with standards because that was so important to our school to make sure that kids were learning. After we unpacked the standards, we planned different projects. Then we learned different mediums so that we could do different cool projects. And then we created beautiful work. And then finally, we would conference and evaluate, and our grades were determined collaboratively and kind of on the spot, which was really great for me as a teacher because grading is my least favorite part of teaching. But to get and like talk with kids in real time about what they're doing and what they're proud of is gold. And what we found was student choice, and there was more student engagement, there was better learning environments for everyone. And I recognize that it's easy to say, okay, yeah, you had kids build, canoes out of cardboard, but like, does it work? Did they actually learn geometry? And what I can tell you is that we looked at the MAP scores for students in honors compared to the students in SLC. And what we found in the past is that our honors students typically didn't show as much growth. Like they still scored well and scored high, but they quit moving forward. And we found that kids in SLC grew 1.9 more points in both math and writing. And in terms of reading, they grew 3.3 more points. The other thing too is there were a couple students who were sort of they weren't part of that like high class of achievers in the beginning, like their test scores were just a bit lower. And some of them grew more than 8 points in their MAP test, which is a huge amount of growth because usually we're looking for 1 point of growth. So that was really exciting. So it seems to suggest, based on 1 year of data, that yeah, kids learn stuff, which is great. And I think we had fun, at least I hope so, because all those youth researchers were also SLC students. So at least I haven't totally scared them away. So that is the story of SLC. What I'd like to do right now is just kind of dive into an SLC type project and get us doing things because doing is more fun than listening. Are there any questions though before I move forward? Cool. See, this is what I mean by the like super fast talking. So in SLC, we shot for every day early in the year and then they kind of like dwindled off because the kids didn't need as much support. We would do medium instructions. And so in medium instruction, we would do podcasting, we would do comic life, we would do 3D modeling, we would do architectural modeling, all sorts of different mediums. I think one student even taught a class on just like how to stay organized and sort of focusing on those executive skills. So that's what we're going to do today, is have a medium lesson, but we're going to focus on podcasting in particular. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to do these 4 things. 1, open the app and create an account. 2, create a recording. 3, add background music. and 4 add a sound effect. So if you can do those 4 things at the end of the lesson, congratulations, you have aced your first SLC medium instruction lesson. Okay. So first, if you would, create your account. So open up the app and it should prompt you. I always sign in with Google because I can't be trusted to remember a password. If you wouldn't mind, can you let me know when you have your account open? You've made your account and you're ready to go. All right, yay, all right. So we are 25% of the way done. Excellent. Is there anyone who needs more time? This is the weird part about not being in person. It's harder to tell. Okay. All right, remember that story I asked you to hold on to? Are you still holding on to it? Good, because you're just about to record it. So when you open Anchor, it'll take you to this screen and you want to select, I want to make a new podcast up at the top. So go ahead and click that now. Next, you're going to record your clip. So to do this, you click Tools. It's that purple plus down at the bottom. And that's going to take you to the second menu where there'll be a red button that says Record. So if you would, right now, that sentence that you shared in your group, go ahead and make that recording on your phone. So I'm going to mute myself, say my story, and then I'll tell you the next step. Okay. It looks like most mouths have stopped moving, so I think that we've got it recorded. So now you are half of the way through the lesson if you've done that. So we have our recording. So the next, on your phone, it should say, you should see a button that says Add Music. So go ahead and click that. And you'll see there's a little like a plus button on the side. Those are so you can hear what it sounds like, but go ahead and click a couple. And then when you're ready to choose one, let's say you decide to go with Compton, click the little plus button. So we're going to take 1 minute to listen to different sounds and choose one to add as a backtrack to your words. So if you would, go ahead and make your selection. You'll want to click Save down in the lower right. Then it's going to ask you to name your segment. So this is, you can record multiple segments and arrange them and move them around. So I'm going to call mine Little Prince Introduction. And then click Add Recording to Episode. Have we made it that far? Does anyone need more time? Cool. I see one more ready to go. Miss Alla looks like she's very focused. Did you get it? Success? Hey, all right, wonderful. All right, is there anyone who's lost so far? Because these are the basic skills that you'll need to take into your breakout room. So I just want to make sure we're okay on those steps so far. Cool. All right, so the next one, now this is part 3 of 4. So what I want to make sure is that everyone knows how to add a sound effect. So when you're on your main screen, click that little plus tools. And this time down at the bottom, swipe towards the left. And at the very end, there's a sounds. So if you swipe through, and here are all sorts of fun and sometimes obnoxious sound effects you can add to your podcast. So go ahead and choose one and add that to your podcast. To get out of this menu, there's a little X up at the top. So if you click that, it'll take you back to all of the different segments you've recorded and all of your, and all of your sound effects. So the other thing that's nice too is you can drag these segments and rearrange them. You just need to make sure that you click save after you do so. I've made that mistake. All right. So finally, if you can do all of those things, congratulations, you have passed, you have met the standard. But if you want to exemplify or go one step further, you can actually go through and manipulate the segments themselves. So to do this, on the one you record, if you click those 3 little dots, you can go to a screen that says edit audio, and all of a sudden it looks very scary to me. So all you're doing here though is you can split it up into different parts. So let's say you make an error in the middle. You can put split before and split after. And you do that. You do that by clicking this little button. So it's going to break this sound effect in half, both before and after. And what's nice about it, you click save. Now I have 2 bits. And when I look at my list of tracks, I have 2. So now let's say I want to delete one because I made a mistake. It's an easy way to edit that way. So the next thing that's kind of cool and I really love about this is you can go in and click publish. I'm just gonna write test. But what's cool about this is it connects kids to it. We'll put it up on SoundCloud so kids can actually connect to an authentic audience, which is pretty cool. I think at least some of the students in here actually put ads into their podcast so that they could make money every time their English teacher listened to it. I'm sure it was, like 4 cents, but every time I played it, it went into their little cash, account. So again, audience seems to be pretty key, I think, in education. Are we okay on that so far? I haven't lost anyone. Tech is like such a hit or miss. Either you're going too slow or too fast. There's never a just right. Okay. All right. So that's an example of a medium lesson, but it wasn't all just mediums. We also had to have standards. And so these are ones that I pulled out of the 9th grade curriculum. This is a social studies one. Students were asked to examine how certain texts came to be viewed as sacred. So we're going to do that in our small groups again. And I'm going to put in these 4 discussion questions into the chat. So first, what makes something sacred? 2, what are some examples of non-traditional sacred texts? So I think it's kind of interesting to think of texts beyond just writing. So for instance, I can look at the clothing that some of the people are wearing here, and we can read it and learn something about them, right? You can read a painting, you can read a quilt. So I think it's fair for our purposes today, to think broadly about what we mean by text. And then 3rd, how does something come to be sacred? And then 4th, what impact does this text have either on you individually or on society? Are there any questions about those before I send you back to your breakout rooms? Let me drop this in the chat box.
I have a question. Can you give us an example of sacred texts you mean in this exercise?
Definitely. So I would make the argument that Harry Potter might be a sacred text. And the reason I would make that argument is because it got kids to read. I think it radically changed an entire generation by inspiring good action. And so do I think it's up there with like traditional holy texts? No, but I think that there's something sacred about it. We could go into it too, like how it's a character who sacrifices himself for like the betterment of the world. That seems like an important lesson to also teach to kids.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, a non-literary one, I think a hijab can be a really powerful sacred text, right? When I think about it, as a 6th grader explained it to me, she just put it on. She's like, I wear it because my mom wore it and because my grandma wore it. And it was just this like long chain of all of these women who'd worn it. And this was a text in a way, right? Because it says something about her. She goes out into the world. But it was so cool to see the way she interpreted that and the meaning that it gave her. So I'm so glad you asked that. Any other questions? Cool. I'm going to send you off to your breakout rooms. You should be with the same group as before. Let's see. And if we could, we'll spend 4 minutes having that discussion, which I know is not enough time. I always think it's a good sign when people come back really slowly from the breakout rooms, because I think that means that everyone's like frantically trying to get their like thoughts out. Cool. How are your conversations? Did you find something? What were your sacred texts?
He made a note of a family recipe being a sacred text, and Saleh and Ms. Khashab agreed with it, and just kind of how it's been passed down for a long time is something sacred.
I love that. I also love too that there's like, at least in our family, I feel like there's always like a little secret around it. Like you can't tell what the secret ingredient is. It's almond extract, but you're not allowed to tell. And I think that there's something that like adds to that. Great, cool. What else?
Our group discussed about how legal systems could also be considered as sacred, such as like constitutional, like like laws, just everywhere really. It doesn't have to be in a certain country because it's guiding people to the right way. And if you don't do them, there are punishments.
I really love that. And I think it's really interesting to think about the implications now, like just in the like global theater, there's some interesting things going on and interesting interpretations of law. Cool. I love that interpretive aspect of it.
I'll interrupt here. Our group discussed sort of generational stories that get passed on. So a little bit similar to recipes, but stories that, you know, grandparents tell their children, then no doubt you're going to tell them to your children as well.
Anyone else?
So in our group, Ms. Fowler brought up the US Constitution or just any governing documents really. And then since we had like all teachers in our breakout room, I think they also mentioned
I'm so sorry, Ray.
And yeah, so they also talk about classroom rules, sort of as it also, like students also have to abide by it, even though it's governing or a smaller number of people.
I love that. That's excellent. I like that it seems like there's this idea that there's this ephemeral quality to it. It's passed down. There's like a time aspect to it. I love too that it's meant to like guide behavior. Awesome. Those all feel like really great characteristics of sacred texts. So.
In our room, we mentioned also how songs can become sacred texts.
Oh, and then can you say more?
Baby rhymes, how the feeling it creates in you when you hear them when you're even older. So yeah, we mentioned that.
I love it. I also too, like I have a little baby niece, and so I've been like looking up all of these like nursery songs to sing her, and they are dark. Some of these things are really horrible. It's like, why is the baby falling off a tree, and why are we concerned about this? But I think Nadia, you raised such a good point. Like I read these words, and it's really about the feeling too. So there's that like abstract quality to it. So into it. All right. Cool. So what we just did is we played with the standard. And if we were in the classroom, we would add complexity, right? Like we'll come to an understanding of like, here are some characteristics that we think make up a sacred text. And then we would bring in maybe a traditional sacred text and see how that impacts our understanding. So right now, this is what I use in my classroom. I can identify a sacred text. Check. It seems like everyone did that. 2, I can analyze how the text impacts society. I think some groups did, some groups didn't. Like ours we were thinking more of like the individual, but I would say we're part of society. So we can make that jump pretty quickly. And we can elaborate upon how the texts are sacred, right? So when we're talking about, there's maybe an element of secrecy, or it's meant to be like evoke a feeling, right? Or it's meant to guide behavior. So if you can say yes all the way down for this, congratulations, you have a B. You've done all the things the standard has asked. But in the world of SLC, we live in interdisciplinary space. So a student might, for instance, choose to mix this history standard with this English one, it's a narrative writing one. So engage and orient the reader by setting out a problem, situation, or observation, establishing one or multiple points of view, and introducing a narrator and or characters to create a smooth progression of events. So I give that to students, but then I like to break it down into these I can statements. So I can capture the reader's attention. I can set out a problem, situation, or observation. I can establish a point of view, and I can create a smooth progression of event. And so I give this to students, and before we like at the end with their project, we sit and we go down this list together and they say yes, no. And usually I have them do it beforehand. So that's what we're going to do with the time that's left to us, is engage with those 2 standards. So, and I'll, in the chat box, I'll link them too. So it doesn't have to be memorized, but the long and short of it is, you're going to tell a story about a sacred text. And we're going to make a podcast to do that. In your podcast though, you need to include at least 2 sound effects and a background track. And all voices might be included. When we say all voices included, it doesn't mean that everyone has to be recorded. If you want to create a Google Doc and some people are typing, as long as everyone feels included in the process, I'm a happy camper. And the 4th one is just shoot for 2 to 3 minutes. It doesn't have to be really long. Today, I wish we could spend time, hours and hours really perfecting the art of podcasting. I just want to make sure that we can work collaboratively as a group to produce a podcast that uses both a history and an English standard. Are there any questions about this? Okay, so let me drop those standards that we're working with into the chat box. And what's really fun too is if you can get all the way through and get yes all the way down, that gets you to the B. And the A is usually collaboratively determined with the student. And I almost always say you have to have some kind of audience. So. All right. You have that? Making a podcast? Is it helpful to, let me put those rules into the chat box too. Feel free to use a Google Doc if that's a helpful space, or you can use the chat box. Since everyone has the app, I think the easiest thing is probably to elect one person to be the recorder who will record the thing. And I'd like to spend, so we'll take about 9 minutes, which is like an absurdly little amount of time, but see how much you can get done. Let go. None was yours okay? Good.
It was good, yeah. Your facilitators are amazing. They're great.
They're so good, right? This is why I want to spend all day with them. All right. I'm so sorry that was not nearly enough time, but I do just want to check in. How did it go? Were you guys able to get anything done, a script? Where were you in the process before I interrupted?
Me and Ms. Bowers and I, we had a really good conversation, and we were a lot more in depth than last time. And we managed to get like 8 minutes worth of just talking about, yeah, just going in depth with just sacred texts and venturing past the borders of it.
I love this. All right, you little overachievers, well done. This is good. Who else? Anyone else want to share out what they did?
Yeah, our group also has about 8-9 minutes because we had a pretty free discussion about sacred texts, and we also brought in some personal anecdotes. So it kind of recorded our discussion.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sound effects and background. Yeah.
Cool. Jude, is that a hand?
Yeah, our group, it was a little bit shorter than 8 or 9 minutes because we first kind of talked through how we wanted to approach it, and we kind of ended up deciding on we wanted to tell the story of how it came to be a sacred text. And so we had chosen the family recipe, so we each took on the perspective or persona of one of the people in the family, and we kind of depicted how the recipe was passed down.
That's brilliant. I love it. I love how varied, these were, and like how scripted. And also too, I think it's worth mentioning that when we looked at SLC, one of the things we found is that those executive skills, being able to plan out a project, figuring out how to assign deadlines and things like that, that was some of the most powerful learning we saw come out of the program. So I just want to check in real quick. So our learning target was, I can facilitate. So do you think you could take, I know that we've just barely put our toes in the water. Do you feel like you could facilitate a choice in standards-based interdisciplinary project, which is kind of what you just did? 4 is yeah, absolutely. 3, yep, but I need a little more practice. 2, kind of, I'm way, way shaky, but maybe get it. 1, woof. But there was a private chat that said, If a recipe is a sacred text, then are the meals they make sacred text too? I think that's a great question. All right. So I'm sorry, we dropped in the chat box where you are. It's just 4, got it, 3, yeah, kind of 2, maybe 1. I'm super lost. Okay, all right, the goal is to get to a 3. Awesome. Good. That feels great. All right, so I wish we had more time and go into it, but I just want to point out that this is like this medium works with so many different fields. So we just took 2 standards. It's really easy to do it in science because there's so much discussion that happens around it. It's a flexible medium, which I think is fun for kids. And what's nice is when you build up their like bank of different resources, maybe they decide to do a podcast with this group of standards, and with this one, they're going to do a bunch of comics, and with this one, they're going to do stop motion videos. So for the final reflective piece, as we kind of sign out, if you would just choose one of these, and you can either unmute or use the chat box, what's a piece of SLC you can take? What adaptations would you want to make? What questions do you still have? And what thoughts are you left with? I know for me, my thought is, I'm going to mute, I'm going to use the chat box on this one. If there are people working on reflections, oh, great. We've one, I wonder if I could get a hold of unpacked standards for other disciplines so I could incorporate them into my classes by providing student choice as to which ones they'd like to connect with my class. That's super cool. And Lauren, I can give you all the ones that I have for SLC. So I have 9th grade ones, but you might need ones from other classes for sure. Yeah. Cool. Real life is interdisciplinary, so our teaching needs to be at that level to make it more sense to our students. Could not agree more. Oh my gosh, learning my actual life is never siloed into, ooh, today I'm doing my English chores. Today I'm doing my math chores. They're always blending. Found the unpacked tech ones. Oh, yay. Good, Christy, that's a good resource. All right, if you have reflections, feel free to drop them in. Just want to let you know that I do have, if you're interested, we give students a fair amount of structure. So there's like a student learning plan where they unpack them and are asked to describe their projects. So if you're interested in that, it's available at this URL down at the bottom, which I'll put into the chat box. So it'll have a template and then an example, a checklist, then also a sample rubric. But beyond that, thanks for being really participatory. I know I had a ton of fun in my group. I hope it was meaningful to you guys and that you have a great day.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in amazing workshop with Laura. I hope you enjoyed your time. You learned something tonight. And yeah, the link is now in the chat. Thank you so much, Laura. We hope you enjoyed your time with us as well. It was great to see you again. It was great seeing everyone. And we'd love to host you again sometime in the future with when you're done with your PhD soon.
Next month, 3 weeks.
Yay! We'll be very happy to host you again and congratulate you and hear all about it. Thank you, everyone. We are really happy you stayed with us. We went a little bit over time, but it was worth it. It was really a cool experience. And we hope to see you soon in other programs that are dedicated for teachers, for students, and for everyone. Laura, would you like to say something before we close?
Just thank you so much. And thanks to my co-facilitators who are awesome researchers and are just killer human beings. And thanks for the opportunity and all the people who made this happen. So.
And yeah, definitely thank you for the students. Thank you for being here, for helping out. You were amazing. You made the breakout rooms so much fun. Thanks for taking this time to join us.
Oh, thank you.
Good night.